Welcome to Consider the Sources, Photographic Collections Exposed. I'm Linda Rendolfe. We are live from the Benjamin Powell House in Colonial Williamsburg. Our conversation today is about media and image collections at the John D. Rockefeller Jr. Library. These collections help inform our understanding of early Williamsburg and document ongoing work at the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. They also illustrate current programming and research in the historic town and art museums. We'll get to your questions very soon, so please post them in the comments. Our guests are Marianne Martin, Visual Resources Librarian, and Tracy Golden, Media Collections Manager. Marianne, please tell us about the role of a Visual Collections Librarian.
Well, in my role, I oversee pictorial archives that are housed at the John D. Rockefeller Jr. Library. So these include black and white photographs, slides, transparencies, lantern slides, glass plate negatives, scrapbooks, albums, and drawings. And in my role, I arrange and describe those collections, I catalog them, I coordinate digitization of the material with Tracy's crew and also with an outside vendor. I also work on a lot of reference requests and rights and reproductions requests and participate in outreach activities like exhibits, social media, and presentations.
Excellent. And Tracy, can you tell us a little bit about your role?
Sure. Media collections consists of our visual history at the foundation. So we have motion picture film, analog and digital video and audio recordings, as well as our digitally born photography. And so we not only maintain all of that, but we also capture new photography and create new assets for the foundation. And all of that is kept in a digital asset management system, which in-house we call the Source for obvious reasons. And so we administer that and make sure that we visually document the things that are going around the foundation programming. We have a stock catalog and those kinds of things. And that is all under our team. And we also, of course, work closely with Marianne to get a lot of what she has digitized and available to people as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tracy and Marianne, for telling us about your work with these collections. Now, let's take a moment to learn more about the importance of early Williamsburg photography in the Visual Resources Collection.
The Visual Resources Collection, located within the library's Special Collections Department, encompasses over 500,000 images in a variety of analog formats. The library holds over 50 collections documenting pre-restoration and Restoration-era Williamsburg. These core collections formed the basis of what became the Visual Resources Collection and were assembled by the Williamsburg office of architects Perry, Shaw, and Hepburn, who oversaw the initial restoration work. Many of these collections contain examples of formats that illustrate the history of the development of the photographic medium. The Rockefeller Library also accessions and preserves photographs produced by different departments throughout the foundation that have permanent research value. Departmental photo collections represented include architectural research, archaeology, museum collections, products, publications, and marketing. In addition, the library collects images taken by outside photographers, which visually document aspects of Colonial Williamsburg and local history that are not adequately covered in its institutional visual archives. They include materials such as travel albums and scrapbooks offering a tourist's perspective on Williamsburg, the Albert Durant Photography Collection, approximately 10,000 photos taken by Williamsburg's first licensed black photographer, World War II-era scrapbooks and aerial photographs illustrating the impact of the war years upon Williamsburg, and photos relating to collectors and major collections donated to the art museums. Preservation of the Rockefeller Library's analog visual collections encompasses a combination of environmental controls, rehousing, reformatting unstable materials, conservation treatments, and digitization. Rehousing of photographic collections in acid-free archival boxes, folders, and sleeves is an important first step in processing a collection that aids in stabilization. Storage areas for our black and white and color photographic prints, slides, glass negatives, and lantern slides are secure vaults with a temperature of 64 degrees and 30 to 50% relative humidity. Compact storage via rolling shelving for prints and lectrevers for slides and transparencies help to store a large volume of images in a small amount of space. Cold storage and isolation of certain groups of images from others is another important step for preserving the photographic collections. Cellulose acetate negatives from the late 1920s and 1930s have developed vinegar syndrome, a form of deterioration that affects the base of the negative and causes it to start emitting a vinegar odor and to buckle and shrink. These negatives are stored in separate refrigerators to slow down deterioration until conservation treatment is undertaken. With over 500,000 analog formats, cataloging the vast archive of images is daunting. Finding aids, folder or item-level inventories of the contents of collections assist researchers in determining specific groups of photos that may be of interest. Selected collections may be viewed online via the library's Omeka site for visual materials, which couples individual digital images with a scope note for the collection and information about its creator. The Visual Resources Collection is heavily used by both internal and external patrons. Images are valuable tools for employees throughout the Foundation who use them to conduct research and prepare for projects, new programming, exhibitions, publications, and lectures. Outside users from around the world, ranging from journalists and authors, documentary film producers, trade and textbook publishers, students, educators, and designers regularly contact us for permission to use reproductions of our images. To underscore the value of our visual archives and highlight its treasures with the broader community, the Rockefeller Library also regularly engages in outreach activities. Staff presentations highlighting various aspects of Williamsburg's history introduce many fascinating photos from our collection to special interest groups and the general public. Photo identification projects offer another form of outreach. One example is our ongoing efforts to meet with members of Williamsburg's Black community to obtain more names of people, places, and events pictured in the photographs of photographer Albert Durant. In addition, exhibits, both in-person and virtual, offer an avenue for showcasing the breadth of our image collections. Our library exhibit, Hollywood Comes to Williamsburg, A Century of Movie and Media Productions, chronicles the history of both movies and television programs filmed by outside production companies using Colonial Williamsburg as a backdrop, as well as the educational film productions created over the decades by the Foundation's own audiovisual team.
Marianne and Tracy are ready to answer your questions, so go ahead and post them in the comments. Marianne, if a disaster occurred and you could only save a few items from the photographic collections, what would be your top priorities?
Well, one of our top priorities would be some vintage black and white photographs that were part of photographic albums that were assembled by the architects Brayshaw and Hepburn when they were doing the initial restoration work in the late 20s and early 30s. And those are very important because they document each site from pre-restoration through the excavations, the progress of restoration or reconstruction, and then completion. And in terms of color formats, because we do have a cold storage unit for color format masters that are in another building, we would focus more in the library on things that don't have a backup master, so things like lantern slides and hand-colored prints.
All right, that's quite a responsibility. All right, what are some of the different challenges between preserving older photographs and film, say from the 1930s, to more recent photos and videos that are captured on digital formats?
Well, for the older photographs, as you saw in the video segment, we have issues like the vinegar syndrome that affects the negatives, and We also, many of the photos are mounted on album pages or on mats using adhesives, and a lot of times that will leach through and damage the photos. And then just some of the chemicals that were used to develop a photograph can sometimes over time affect, the residue of those chemicals can affect the photograph. And so we use a variety of measures such as rehousing and acid-free folders and boxes and archival sleeves to help slow down that process and protect the photographs.
Are there any challenges with with digital items that are only on digital format?
Right. Well, obviously the technology also always changes and evolves. And right now we're storing all of that locally on premises. And so we're looking to the future to store all of our digital assets on the cloud. And the challenge there is just resources as far as having the financial means to buy more storage, because some digital files can be very large, especially video, digitized film can be really, really big. And so if we can store those on the cloud and then expand outward, the big challenge there is more financial than anything else. But we also do have 2 cold storage vaults in our building, and those help us maintain everything at a constant rate and humidity to try and slow down or stop. It usually slows down any problems as they might occur or grow over time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And for the color formats, the cold storage is really important because a lot of our slides and transparencies over time, they will start developing issues with color fading and
Right.
other forms of deterioration. Some of them get little red spots that we call measles.
Yeah.
So,
And the same thing with motion picture film, right? So I mean, it's the same thing, it's just on a reel, but so we keep that slightly colder than we would normal still photography, but that's still in a separate vault by itself, and we have the same kinds of problems with those guys too.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Marianne. And now let's answer some more questions from our audience. Tina would like to know, where is the library, and can anyone go and check out books?
well, the library is located in Bruton Heights School Education Center, just adjacent to the historic area. It's open to the general public on Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. However, we don't circulate books to the general public. We only circulate to Colonial Williamsburg staff and William and Mary faculty and students. But anybody is welcome to come to the library and use resources on site.
Eric would like to know, are there any photos or video from the opening day of Colonial Williamsburg?
Well, in terms of photographs, yes, there are. The first exhibition building that opened was the Raleigh Tavern, and so they had a dedication ceremony, and we do have photographs of that, as well as some things like the program for the ceremony that are housed in our corporate archives.
Another question is, could you describe one of the most unusual visual material requests that you've received?
Well, one that comes to mind is a grocery store contacted me, and they wanted photographs of the Capitol from all different angles so that they could build a model of it using sugar cubes for a display in the grocery store in honor of Williamsburg's 300th anniversary. And then another interesting request I had was from an individual who was designing the White House Christmas ornament. And that year they were going to have a horse and carriage theme. So the individual came to look at our photographs of horses and carriages in the historic area, as well as some 18th century carriage drawings that we have in special collections.
I would imagine that you must get requests from other historic institutions, since Colonial Williamsburg has such a well-established library. How often does that happen?
Yes, we do get requests from sister institutions. I do work fairly often with the visual resources manager at Mount Vernon's library, and so sometimes they're asking for permission to use our images in some of their publications and exhibits. And we also work with a lot of museums around the country, or up in Richmond we have the Library of Virginia, Virginia Museum of History and Culture, and the Valentine Museum.
So our next question is, how can a researcher learn more about your non-digitized visual holdings?
Well, because our collections are so immense in size, access and description for them is a big challenge. We do have a lot of internal finding aids and databases, but we have a lot of work to do in terms of getting those into an online format that outside researchers can see. So we're just making some small progress towards that. We do have some finding aids on the Virginia Heritage site, and we also are getting some collection level catalog records into our library catalog.
I would imagine that having that kind of data available to you with such a vast collection must be really critical to you being able to provide that kind of information.
Right. Yeah, it's important, especially with images. A lot of item level description has to occur in order to be able to track down the specific images that people need.
Right, thank you. So our next viewer would like to know, what are you working on now?
Well, it's windy. We are working on lots of projects, obviously, but one of the big ones that has been going on for over a year is the documentation of our trees. And if you come to Colonial Williamsburg, you've seen pictures. We have many, many trees. And CW is a level 2 arboretum for our landscape staff. And so we thought one thing we hadn't documented, maybe ever, was our collection that they are maintaining throughout the historic area. And when you go, you'll see there are QR tags on some of the trees and bushes, and those are living documents, living objects in their collection. And so Jenna Simpson, who is our assistant media collections manager, and our volunteer Jerry McCoy are going around and literally photographing every single tree, bush on the list. And so those are going to join the rest of our digital assets in the source, because we just hadn't realized, we know it was a collection, we hadn't thought to do that. The big one we did in February was the documentation of the Benjamin Spraggins sociable carriage dedication. And it was a huge event. It was certainly on the internet, on the CW website, but it dedicated a brand new carriage in memory or in honor of Black coachmen that worked at Colonial Williamsburg in the 18th and 20th centuries. And so we, all four of us on our team, went out then, Wayne, Jerry, Jen, and myself, and we documented it. We had been documenting it all along, but we documented that actual ceremony, and we have thousands of images from that whole process. And now we'll have them for the next 50, 100 years, even if you need them next week, you know, so that was a big one.
Excellent. What are some of the recent items added to the collection?
Well, right now, a new collection that has come in is the Gertrude Ball Diversa slide collection. And Gertrude's family were life tenants of the Peyton Randolph House, and she worked at Colonial Williamsburg from 1947 to 1978. And her slides document a lot of the costumed interpreters that she worked with. She did work in costume, and buildings and gardens in the historic area, but also a lot of the visits of distinguished dignitaries to Colonial Williamsburg. So individuals such as the King and Queen of Greece, the Queen Mother, Prince Akihito of Japan, and the Lord Mayor of London.
That's quite a variety of dignitaries, but you know, on the large scale, we know that those are big events that naturally would be covered. Are there other things beside the trees that folks might find interesting that you do document, you know, on the smaller scale?
Well, we go out and photograph everything, I mean, that we can feasibly do. Be it interpretive programming, nation builders, interpreters at work, gardens, obviously the trees, big, small, and everything in between, because the purpose of media collections is certainly continue what Visual Resources has, so that we know what this period in time looks like, what our interpretation looks like, so that in 5, 10, 100 years, we still know what it looks like at this period of time. And it always changes, because as new research happens, they can change costuming or change music or whatever it is.
Paint colors of buildings.
Paint colors of buildings are a big one. Yes, absolutely. And so we have a new photographer with us named Brendan Sostak, and he is just starting out and getting to know people, and will start documenting even more, certainly our African American programs, American Indian programs. All of that is super important, and you use it for things you don't even know you're going to use it for yet.
Well, certainly today's events are, tomorrow's history. So.
Exactly.
Right. Another question from a viewer is, which educational credentials offer the best route to a career working with visual collections?
Well, there's a number of different educational paths you could follow. And Tracy and I have somewhat different backgrounds, and I think we really complement each other because of that and bring different strengths to the table. I have a BA and MA in art history plus an MLIS degree with a focus in archival administration and visual materials.
And I have a BA in history as well as an MA in, it's called public history or museum studies. And both Jenna and myself actually completed a DAM certificate program, DAM being digital asset management. And so that's a huge field. Everybody uses digital assets, they need to be managed. And so we have been doing it. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years, Marianne as well. And so we need to know the latest, greatest technology and methods and so on. And so we're keeping up our studies with that as well. But anybody can do it. Just have to get out there and go to school and learn how to do it, and just like we did, right?
And I imagine the technology keeps changing as
does.
well, so that's got to be another challenge.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
it
can be
does.
a challenge. And from the library and archival side of things, they're constantly upgrading the types of systems you might use for cataloging archival collections, preparing finding aids. There's a big change looming on the horizon with the structure of catalog records for online library catalogs as well.
And then when you count in the changes and ever faster occurring changes in how you acquire images these days,
Right.
from your iPhone or whatever camera you're carrying on to, all the way back to
exactly.
film.
And technology isn't cheap, I mean, even cell phones in some regard aren't cheap, but the equipment that we have, and as technology evolves as far as even digital video capture and digital photography, I mean, a new camera comes out every year and a new format. Thankfully, like TIFFs remain standard archival. But the way to capture those and maintain them change all the time. It's expensive.
Exactly.
I mean,
just a short time ago it was digital, and now we're talking about 8K. So everything keeps
I thought 4K
moving.
was bad. Now we're going to 8K.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oy." So
Right, thank you. Well, another question from Cindy is, do you have a way for the public to acquire prints and how to pay for them?
Yes, and I handle rights and reproductions requests on behalf of the library. So you can contact me, and there's a couple different types of application forms you'd fill out depending on whether it was just for personal use or for something like publication or exhibition. And I can assist you with submitting the order, advise you of any fees involved, and then process the reproduction order and get the item to you. And then Tracy also has something called Media Collections Online.
Right, and so that database allows you to see a small sample of what is in the source outside or to external partners, external users, visitors, guests, and they can get low-res JPEGs for personal use for free, or high-res images, digital images for home use if they want to put on the walls of their house, Christmas cards and that kind of thing. And then for anything else professional, then they contact Marianne to get that license as well as prints.
That's a very nice option. All right. Another question is, will there ever be online access to all the photos relating to a particular building in the historic area?
Well, due to the immensity of our image collections and all the different formats that images can be in, that's a pretty daunting task. So we just have to set priorities and break things down into small and manageable goals, and every year we make more progress towards that.
And we're hoping, as technology evolves, we're actually looking at a new digital asset management system that will enable us to put more of our digital assets, certainly what Marianne has perhaps, as well as what we are creating today, online because the source, our current digital asset management system can't get through our firewall. So people can't see what that has, except through MCO or Media Collections Online. So we're hopeful that in the next year, we can get a new one that will enable us to do a little bit more of that. So while no, we can't immediately just dump it all out there, but we will prioritize and put it out there as we can, certainly. So it'll be exciting when it happens, and everyone has to stay tuned.
Right. Well, thank you for those questions. Let's take a moment to learn how the media collection team captures and catalogs photographs, film, and video, as well as audio of current programs and research at Colonial Williamsburg. Remember, please continue to post your questions in the comments.
Media collections is our moving image collection, our audio collection. We've been collecting since 1930. That was our first film. It was called the Harvard Footage. CW partnered with University Film. That was part of the Harvard Foundation. They came down and literally mounted a motion picture camera on the back of a truck and drove up and down Duke of Gloucester Street. It was at the very beginning of the restoration, so there was a little work being done on the street. The Raleigh Tavern was being constructed, Merchant Square, but basically it shows you Williamsburg before any real serious restoration happened. It's a really cool document on what the town looked like before Williamsburg became Colonial Williamsburg that we know today. In addition, of course, we have an audio archive that goes back to that same period, say the mid-20th century. Our audio recordings, musical programs, especially things like fife and drum music, chamber music, Christmas music is a big one at Colonial Williamsburg. We kept copies of all of those records except a few, and one of them was the Williamsburg Quintet.
Way down, little children, way down, way down yonder in Egypt land.
We actually didn't have an album. We had the master recording on tape, but we didn't have an album, and somebody found a copy in a thrift store and sent it to our vice president at the time with a note saying, "Hey, I found this in the thrift store, thought you'd be interested. Here it is," and which was awesome.
I'm a rolling through this unfriendly weather.
It's a great, great album. The department started in 1951, the audiovisual department under Art Smith. We started making educational programming, and sound went along with that because we needed to record sound to go along with the motion pictures. So they both kind of went along together. We made dozens and dozens of educational films that were sent out and distributed to schools, community groups to educate about Colonial Williamsburg and colonial life in America. In the late 1990s, they started an educational film series called Electronic Field Trips to bring Colonial Williamsburg to students who couldn't come here. That went on for 21 years. It garnered 16 regional Emmys, and it still exists. People can still access them today, so kids are actually still learning from programming that we developed in the early part of this century. In 2000, we started experimenting with digital photography, and by 2003, the photography staff decided that, hey, we're going to switch all the way over. So we went all out digital, and we started digitizing everything. We have a new photographer on staff, Brendan Sostak. He not only does photography in the historic area, but also in the studio for various setups that we might have. And he also is our digital imaging technician. We've been blessed in the last 5 years to have two wonderful, giving, and talented volunteer photographers. That would be Wayne Reynolds and Jerry McCoy. Our mission is to visually document the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. It's everything you can imagine we have pictures of because it's needed for any number of purposes. So we all scan the film that's in our film vaults, and we make those available for staff, researchers, and volunteers and interns through a digital asset management system that in-house we call the Source, and everyone can access those assets. We have about 450,000 digital assets in that system. We're constantly growing every single week. Anywhere you look on the internet, those are probably images that came from our digital asset management system. We have in-house folks, researchers, volunteers, interns, every department you can think of, social media, especially marketing. Those images usually come from the Source. It's also used in print publications, Trend and Tradition magazine, books that you see on the shelves in the stores. Those are all stored in the DAM because they're all considered digital assets. And that's how we make all of the things that you see certainly for sale in the shops. One of my favorite They actually made a baseball, and the baseball has images of Colonial Williamsburg all over it. So even our product sources use the images that we create and maintain here. One of the easiest ways for the public to see the images that we have in media collections is via media collections online. The general public can log in and they can see a very small subset of our digital asset management system. It's a lot of beautiful pictures of the historic area, some documentation, some curatorial objects, and they can download low-res JPEGs for free for personal use. The thing that we're doing now to add to our collection is we're starting to collect home movies. It's really exciting because we focused on what we did as an institution, and by collecting home movies we can see how the public looked at Colonial Williamsburg. And so we actually have purchased our very first home movie, which is really awesome because it shows an Englishman. His trip abroad to Colonial Williamsburg is dated July 14th, 1958. He goes to all the major buildings, the Capitol, the Palace, the magazine, and you can see in that time the streets are full of cars. There are bus stops in front of the Raleigh Tavern. There are carriages traveling down the streets. We actually have 3 scenes where there are coachmen driving visitors around the historic area. And the kind of scary thing is the cars are just whizzing by them. And so it looks a little dangerous, but it's a really cool look at how the historic area looked in 1958. We think home movies is a great way to really capture what visitors were looking at back then and things that we just don't have in our institutional archives. We maintain our film negatives and motion picture master prints in cold storage vaults. Those are climate controlled and they are cold so that they maintain for hopefully dozens and dozens, 100 years from now. So we still have that. Now we're still digitizing them because it's far easier to make those assets available online for people, especially researchers in other parts of the country. But we still maintain the masters because they're our primary source documents, basically.
That was a very informative look into the media collection. Please continue to post your questions as Tracy and Marianne are here to answer them for you. Tracy, let's start with you, and can you tell us how your team documents a live program here in Colonial Williamsburg?
Well, we can do it any number of ways. Someone might request it. They might have a program that they'd really like pictures of to put it on the internet, or just to have documents for future PowerPoints, lectures, and so on. Or we might hear of a program that really needs to be documented. Somebody might tell us about it, and so then we work with the program manager of that particular program. We send our photographer, Brendan Sostak, who's our new photographer, out, and then he photographs it fully. And you never know what you might use from particular programs. We might do portraits of everybody, a cast shot, certainly the event in progress. Tomorrow is Drummer's Call. So if you're in town, you can come and see the fife and drum, about 3 or 4, as well as our own, and they're all going to be out tomorrow shooting that. So we'll have lots and lots of great fife and drum photography. So we will photograph just about anything that's happening in Colonial Williamsburg because it documents it, and you just literally never know when you can use it. We have certain things we know we want that people ask for. Again, American Indian photography, for instance, and aerial photography is a big one we're doing now. Wayne Reynolds is our volunteer, one of our volunteers, and he does a lot of aerial photography with his drone for us, which is really cool to see CW from above because most people can't see that. So it's a lot of things like that. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Tracy. Let's continue to take questions from our audience. And the next question is, are there collections like the one here at Colonial Williamsburg in other museums?
Yes, a lot of museums will have some sort of a pictorial archive as well as current digital assets. And so I know in terms of the local region, Mount Vernon's library has a visual resources collection. The Library of Virginia has its visual studies collection. The Mariners Museum has a very large photo archive. The Virginia Museum of History and Culture as well. So it's pretty common for visual documentation to be something that's saved and preserved.
Is it important for you to be able to talk and exchange ideas and technology challenges with folks from other museums?
Yes. I really appreciate the opportunity when I have it to go to conferences and workshops, because then you can meet colleagues from other institutions and find out what they're doing. Sometimes you learn about something that you're not doing that would be a wonderful step forward, and you can put that forward as a suggestion.
All right, thank you. Cindy would like to know, are there volunteer opportunities for those with backgrounds in archival work?
Yes, there definitely are. We've had students who are currently pursuing a library and information science degree, or who are in an archival science graduate program, do internships in the library in special collections. The pictorial archives are part of special collections. We also work with a lot of interns from the College of William and Mary. So just contact us at rocklibrary@cwf.org, and we'll be happy to talk to you.
Let's hope you get some volunteers.
Yeah, and we use volunteers as well. I mean, we couldn't do what we have been doing without our volunteers. We have 2 volunteer photographers who have between them shot about 12,000 images over the past 5 years. And they're very talented, creative, and giving, Wayne and Jerry. And then we have another volunteer, Judy Marks, who scans for us and creates digital assets. And so we are always looking for folks with that kind of technology ability, technological and creative ability, because there is color correction and digital imaging, as well as certainly with creating digital photography. And so we can always use more hands, certainly to catalog, to take photographs and to scan. So the library has been blessed to have a lot of retired librarians and archivists come back.
Right.
And so it's been really, really helpful. But you don't necessarily have to be a retired library professional to work with us. We take everyone.
Volunteers are so
They
essential.
are. They really
Yes,
are.
they really are.
Another viewer question is, what is the oldest item in the collections?
Well, the oldest black and white photo that we have dates to circa 1875, and it's a view looking east down Duke of Gloucester Street from the balcony of the Wren Building. And in the far distance, on the site where the Capitol was located, and at this point in time, the Capitol is no longer there, you can just see the outline of the Female Institute that was on that site at that point in the 19th century, as well as a lot of buildings that used to be located in the area that's now Merchant Square. And then in terms of color formats, the earliest that we have are a set of autochromes with diascope viewers, and those date to about 1907.
How exciting.
And we actually have our oldest moving picture, which a lot of people have seen, which is what we call our Harvard footage, which is mentioned in the video, but it dates to 1930. So we also have one moving image, or set of moving images from that period too.
Yeah.
So
Those are treasures.
they really are.
Yes. Another viewer wants to know how to donate items to the Rockefeller Library.
Well, to donate items, you can contact a library staff member, so you could contact either Tracy or I. You can also contact our library director, Mr. Carl Childs. You could send us an email at rocklibrary@cwf.org, and we'd be happy to talk to you.
What kind of items are you interested to have people donate? Are there specific things that you really would like to have?
Well, we're interested in anything that documents Colonial Williamsburg over time, and also the pre-restoration era, the late 19th century and early 20th century, when they were starting to do some preservation work with some of the buildings that are now part of the historic area, but Colonial Williamsburg didn't exist at that time. So really in terms of analog materials, any format that you have, we'd be interested in seeing.
And we are looking for, as we mentioned, home movies. And I brought this guy with me. We have talked about also, we're happy to accept some photographic equipment, depending upon what it is, but also home movies. It's our new initiative. You saw it in the video, the first one that you have, but it adds a whole other dimension to what we can see with our still photography. And in the 20th century, we know that people came with cameras like this, shooting Super 8, 16 millimeter films. and it shows what the guests were seeing, and there are some things that would be really cool to get moving images of to supplement what you can see in our still photography. So we're hoping that, especially 19th century film, don't throw it out. You might find it, in an attic space or a back closet, and it's a pile of film, and you've been, or the family's been to Colonial Williamsburg. Don't throw it out. Think about us, because we're always looking for that too now. And it's been, like you saw that film clip, it's really, really cool to have. So,
yes. Yeah. All right. Well, we're almost out of time, so let's take one more viewer question. And that question is, what kind of satisfaction do you both get in working with the collection? And Marianne, if we could start with you.
Well, the two things that bring me the greatest satisfaction are, first of all, making those connections between the researchers and the images. So tracking down that group of images that meets their needs and serves as a powerful form of visual communication for their project. And also helping with those connections when people are looking for images of a relative that used to work at Colonial Williamsburg or that lived in Williamsburg in the late 19th or early 20th century, or the homes that they lived in, those touching moments when they find things like that. And then secondly, bringing organization and stabilization to the often disordered collections that first come in, and knowing that through the process of arranging them, cataloging them, carrying out preservation measures, and eventually digitizing them, you're preserving them and making them accessible for many future researchers.
Yeah, they're becoming a part of history.
Right.
All right. And Tracy, what about you?
Similar indeed, but I think what we all like in our department is making sure that all this visual history survives, right? It's not a stable medium, and you never know what the film stock was at the time, and so we want to make sure that what we have now and what we create in the future still is here, so that, again, the future may learn from the past. So we're passing this on to the next generation of museum professionals who can continue our work and improve it as technology advances. And so we're hoping that everything we're doing today and tomorrow really helps it last and keeps it for, again, the next generation. And so, especially when we're visually documenting something, we're hoping to catch this moment in time so that they know what it looks like. Because sometimes people come to us and say, oh, do you have pictures from this event 5 years ago? And we're like, no, that would have been cool. But so that's why we're trying to get ahead of that day. So we really want to make sure that we have it for future generations and future staff to use too. So.
Well, this has been very interesting. Well, Colonial Williamsburg visual resource and media collections are safeguarded in special storage at Colonial Williamsburg, but are visible in so many ways: in art museums and library exhibitions, foundation publications, social media posts, the colonialwilliamsburg.org website, live streams, videos, musical recordings, and more. Thank you, Marianne and Tracy, and your colleagues and volunteers in education, research, and historical interpretation for sharing your enthusiasm about this important work. Video of this and our previous programs will be available for viewing at colonialwilliamsburg.org, on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. We thank you, our virtual audience, for sharing in this season of live streams from Colonial Williamsburg, and hope you will continue to connect with us via colonialwilliamsburg.org and our social media channels. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to all the folks behind the scenes, behind the cameras, who made this series possible. So Colonial Williamsburg relies on the generosity of guests and donors like you. This project was funded in part by a generous grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you for joining us for this program, and remember, when you are considering history, always consider the sources.